to share with you some of the insights that have been gathered over the last few years working in venture capital. As Nikki mentioned, my family and I arrived in Australia as refugees from the Vietnam War. We arrived in the late 70s. In fact, we've been in Australia now for 40 years. So to be able to share these learnings with this audience is really meaningful to me. We're going to go through some fundamentals of venture capital and how it works and how raising money works. And for the investors that are in the audience, and there are a few, I'm going to share with everybody, and it might be interesting to you as well, how we do some of our diligence within our firm. So the objectives are to help you learn about the fundamentals of how venture capital and other types of capital raising works, to hear about the process from different perspectives and understand how the process really works, and to be better prepared for when you start to raise funding for your own venture. All right, so I'll take you through this process. We're going to talk about investment themes. We're going to talk about who's investing in what in Australia. I'm going to take you through a template as well for what an investor presentation looks like and what is normally in an investor presentation. And I'm going to share with you some tips on my side as well. And then we'll have Q&A with the very wonderful and generous folks who are contributing their time, and they'll share some of their tips and perspectives as well. And then we're going to do I think it's Terry who mentioned it, but we're going to do a reverse panel where the panel will then ask me a bunch of questions. And they haven't told me what they are yet, so I don't know. All right, very good. How does venture capital work? And I'm going to try to keep this as simple as possible. As a venture capitalist, what we're doing is we're raising funding as well. Okay, I've just spent the last year raising our second fund. So our first fund was $50 million US. Our second fund is $100 million US, and it's taken us a year to do that. And we raise from pension funds such as superannuation funds, endowments such as university endowments, charitable foundations are more for sort of more typical for impact investors. Large corporations we raise from. So our first fund was made up of only 6 very large corporations in Japan and in Southeast Asia. So these are our sources of capital. And why is this important? It's important that you know that for investors, they need to find their own investors as well. And that process usually takes between 12 to 24 months. Okay, that's the so what of this one. And for those investors, they will invest in startups. But startups don't have to take funding from venture capitalists. They can take in funding from angel investors, corporations, and from government as well. So there are alternative sources of funding for startups as well as VC funding. For the venture capitalists, what they need to do in order to make money is that they need to have some form of exit. And that exit is typically in a number of key forms, and there are only a few. One is when that company that they've invested in lists on a stock exchange. Okay, and then they're able to sell their shareholding. 2 is when another, typically larger company, buys that company, and again, they will sell their shareholding. And number 3, which is less ideal, is when they come to the end of their fund, and they have to then sell their shareholding in that business, or in fact in all of the businesses, to return the capital to the investors, hopefully with some type of profit. And usually when they're selling in that instance, there's a discount to the pricing of the shares, and so it's not as ideal for them. But they're the 3 scenarios, and that's it. In every other scenario, the investor is not making money. I spoke about selling shares at the end of the term of a fund. Why is that important to note? Well, a couple of reasons. Let me just take you through some of these examples. Knowing the size of a fund is important because you know how much money they have to spend. Knowing that a fund typically lasts 10 years is also important, right? Because you know that there is a fund horizon. The reason why that is important is because imagine a fund is investing in you in year 4 of their existence. They will likely hold on to their shareholding in your company for the next 5 years or so. And then they'll look to sell because they'll come to the end of their fund. Yeah, relatively simple so far. To let you know how a venture capital firm works, for each fund, typically the management fee is 2% of the fund size. So they take that 2% and they use that to run the fund. What are the costs of a fund? Well, it's people, it's flying from place to place, it's conducting the due diligence. All of these are costs. So for a $100 million fund, the people who are running the fund will take out $2 million per year for 10 years to run the fund, to pay for all the people that work within that fund. What does that mean? It means that the actual amount that they're investing is actually 80 million, not 100. Does that make sense? Yeah, okay, that's good. This point around carried interest. What this means is that at the end of the fund, once the fund has returned all the money that was invested by the investors, whatever's remaining is the profit. And now the investors, the people who are running the firm, they will take out 20% of that profit, and that profit is for the funds to keep. Okay, and that's called carried interest or carry. That's what they're, that's the upside of what they're looking for. Okay. All funds have what's known as a close date. And a close date is important because when you have an investment period, that investment period starts at the fund close date. So let's take a 10-year fund, which is most funds. Most funds run for 10 years, right? There's a start and there's an end. In that 10 years, all of the new investments will happen within the investment period. And that investment period is typically 4 years. Okay? After that 4 years, there are no new investments in that fund. After that 4 years, the only amount that is invested is what's known as follow-on investment, whereby the companies that have taken in investment already can take in more investment from that same fund. Now, I know that there's a lot of technical stuff here, so I'm trying to make it as super easy and simple as possible, and there are nuances to all of these. For example, our fund is 9 years. It's not 10 years. Our investment period is 4 years, but actually we'll make all of our investments within the first 3 years. So there are different combinations and permutations of all of this. But quite simply, most funds run for 10 years. Most funds use 2% of the funds that are raised to run the firm, to run the company, to make the investments possible. Most funds have an investment period, and that investment period is typically 4 years out of the 10, right? And all funds will have what's known as a fund strategy, and we can go to that next, right? The fund strategy is, what are we investing in? Where are we investing, right? And that's really important because when you speak to investors, you want to speak to investors who are investing in your type of company, in that type of space, at that life cycle stage. Okay? So what? What does this all mean? What does it mean? It means do your research. There's no point reaching out to a fund that invests at what is known as Series B or Series C for growth if you're at seed stage. There's no point reaching out to a fund that invests in China when you're an Australian company that only operates in Australia, for example. Okay, so do your research. Understand where the fund is in its fund horizon. So what you may notice is that VC firms typically every 3 years or so will announce that they've raised a new fund. That's because it's taken them that long to raise that next fund. But it's also because they're coming to the end of their investment period for the current fund. So they're telling everybody, hey, we've raised a new fund, we're coming to the end of the investment period for our current fund, and then we'll be, investing from our next fund. Make sense? Yeah, good see nods, it's a good sign. Okay, and another interesting point is understand what the follow-on allocation is. And follow-on means I've made the first investment in a company, and I've reserved a little bit more money to invest in that company again when they raise that next round of capital. The follow-on ratio to initial investment ratio for most funds is 1/3 new investments, 2/3 follow-on, typically. But again, with all of this, there are nuances. So for us, it's actually the other way around. For us, it's 2/3 initial and 1/3 new. 1/3 follow-on. Okay, cool. Yeah? Cool. So this type of information is really fundamental to the process, right? So you need to understand it because there is a big so what here. And the so what is, do your research so you understand the right folks to reach out to and you understand how they work. All right. Awesome. Okay. Just to remind, these slides will be online. So this is a little drawing that I did to show the different life cycle stages. And this is super, super, super important. The reason why it's important is because most firms, most investors are investing at very specific stages. So Emily Rich from Make Ventures invests at seed stage, so pre-Series A, right? Usually that round of funding is in Australia, at early seed it could be as small as 20K, right? At late seed it could be between 1 million to even on the high side 3 million, which is high. But usually it's somewhere between 500K to $1 million, okay? And so if you're at that life cycle stage, Make Ventures and other seed stage investors are the folks that you would reach out to, okay? And I guess at that stage, it's relatively straightforward, right? You have a presentation, you have a company, you're trying to show that you have product market fit, you have an MVP, and it's in market. Series A and Series B is where our firm invests. And at Series A, you're typically raising a round of between 5 million to, at the high side, 20 million. Migrapreneur raised for their Series A 16 million Australian dollars, which is a pretty large Series A. Series B can really be anything. It can be, we've invested in Series B rounds that are 40 million US dollars. So, it can really range. But what are we looking for? What we're looking for at Series A is what we call product market fit. And what that means is that you can show and that we can believe that you've built something that the market wants to buy. You may not have scaled yet, but we can see through revenue, through usage, through traction, that that's the case. And we need to believe as investors that that's the case, quite simply. But you may not have scaled yet. You may not have what we call sales efficiency yet. Series B is where we expect to see that. So when we're looking at a Series B business, it's different. We want to see that sales and the method of sales and the sales cycle is getting much more efficient. And so that we know that for every dollar that comes in, a certain amount is going to come out. Yeah? And this really is when you're starting to scale. Typically, you're starting to scale, geographically or extending your core product. Does that make sense so far? Yeah? Seed, MVP. Series A, product market fit. Series B, scaling. Yeah? And C and D and E and F, and until the business can stand on its own, all this is really just prepping for that growth, prepping for that IPO, prepping for really the business becoming a mini corporation. Any questions so far? All good? Yeah? So I've simplified everything. There are nuances to all of this, so please keep that in mind. There are nuances to the amount of capital, there are nuances to what we look for and what we expect. But this is a general view so that you can understand and have some fundamentals as to how it works. Awesome. Cool. Very good. All right. So they were life cycle stages, and I was talking about strategy, fund strategy for different VC firms, right? So they invest, we just spoke about, at different life cycle stages. So you really need to note what those life cycle stages are. They also invest in pretty specific geographies, and I'll tell you why. So as an example, the Australian federal government has a program for what's known as ESVCLPs, Early Stage Venture Capital Limited Partnerships. And that tax incentive is pretty significant. That tax incentive is basically saying that if you invest in an ESVCLP, the profits at the end of the fund will not be taxed or taxed at a much lower rate. Much lower rate. What that means, though, is that for an ESVCLP, and most of the leading Australian VC firms are ESVCLPs, it means that they need to deploy at least 80% of their funding in Australian domiciled businesses. Okay, so if you're, if you're a business base in Singapore, for example, if you're looking to raise from an Australian firm, then you need to keep that into account. Can they invest? Yes, they can, but note that they only have a certain percentage that they can allocate to investments outside of Australia. 80% of the capital must be deployed in Australia for the tax incentives that they've committed to be available. Okay, that's why geography is important. And if you note, other jurisdictions, other countries, such as Singapore, which is where our fund is based, will also have their own tax incentives as well. Very good. All right. Industries and themes. Most firms, most funds will be quite specific in the types of companies that they will invest in. For us, we invest in what's known as B2B. B2B is basically a company that builds a product or service that is targeted towards another company. And that other company can be a small to medium business, it can be mid-market, it can be enterprise. Right? For us, we invest across each of those key segments. And we invest specifically in data, SaaS, and fintech. One of our example investments is in an Australian company which we invested at Series A called Data Republic. And Data Republic is actually working in this building. It's one of our more sort of well-known businesses. Because we invest in B2B, most folks don't know the names of the companies that we invest in, but that's one of the more well-known ones. And other folks will have other strategies, other themes. So our good friends at Blackbird, for example, as you may have noticed, have been investing in space, right? A bunch of space-related companies, which is super cool. So be very clear as to what the industries and themes are that these firms are investing in. How do you know? Well, fortunately for us, our good friends at Airtree have posted a list that's actually managed by the community. And if you go to their website, it's on their website as well. The list is pretty comprehensive. The list contains the details of all of the VC firms in Australia, a lot of angel investors, all of the accelerators. So if you go to that site, it's a Google Doc. You just have you click on the link and you'll see there are quite a few. And fortunately, in that table, you'll see, what are folks investing in, at what life cycle stage, how old is the fund, how much is in the fund, right? All of the details are there. So on top of that, though, there are a couple of other online resources to note. One's called Crunchbase. Crunchbase is a spin-off from TechCrunch, which is a site that provides media for the startup space, and CB Insights, which is much more sort of tailored towards investors, but they're both useful resources. So what? So what is this? The best source of truth, according to what folks are saying they're investing in, is actually what they are investing in. Okay? I can say we invest in data, SaaS, and fintech, but if we've made no investments in that space, actually, maybe we really don't. Maybe things have changed. Maybe we're not as, focused on that particular space. Okay, so do your work. The other thing to note is that this changes over time. So, for example, when we first started, we had as our thesis an intention to invest in logistics businesses. But as we, took a look at the space, we figured actually we as a firm could help less. We weren't as sort of convinced in the unit economics of the space across Southeast Asia, and so we actually dropped it from our thesis. So note, that changes over time. And again, Blackbird's probably another good example whereby early on, a lot of the investments were SaaS-oriented, but then it became much more hardware-oriented over the last 12 to 18 months. Okay, so again, do your research, reach out to the relevant firms, otherwise, you're kind of just wasting your time and theirs. And the best source of truth is what they're actually investing in. And if you do a search on Crunchbase, you'll see who's investing in what and where. Cool? Good? All right. I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads, which is awesome. Okay. A quick recap on what VC firms do. So they search for companies. Yeah. They invest. They help to support the companies that they've invested in, and they they network. They provide mentorship and advice. They connect to startups, their startups and other startups, other members of the ecosystem. So, I spend so much of my time doing intros. I'm just constantly introing people left, right, and centre, because if something's not relevant for me, I'll actually pass it on to another investor because it could potentially be relevant for them. I'm sharing information and conducting talks at industry events like this one. That's a bit meta, but yes, that's what I'm doing right now. And it's important for me to do this. It's important for me to share this information so that you within the community understand how the process works. Yeah. And the other so what here is, this is a lot of stuff. This is a lot of stuff to do. So imagine, you've got a relatively small team. We would see roughly 500 investment opportunities a year amongst the three partners. Rick Baker posted, I think about a year ago, that Blackbird sees roughly 1,200 deals a year. Okay? So and we're doing all of this stuff as well. So if a response doesn't come through, the same day, you'll know why, because at the same time we're raising capital and working with portfolio companies as well. Yeah? Very good. All right. I hope that's all clear so far. I think so. I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads. All right. Now, for the investors in the room, and I think other folks will find this interesting as well, I'm going to share some thoughts about these different phases of the process. But I have a much more complex diagram for how it works within our firm, but this is generally how it works in terms of the VC investment process, right? This is important for you to know. But this process takes for us, it can take between 3 months, 4 months, roughly. The fastest deal that we've done from the day of meeting the founder to closing the deal was 10 days. And I never want to do that again, but that's the fastest that we deploy capital. But if you give yourself roughly 6 months and hope to close it within 3 months, that's a very, very good result. Okay? Now let me take you through these parts of the process. So sourcing. One thing that we do, and another thing that I know that other firms do, is we invest on what's known as a thematic basis. We invest according to themes. Because we invest according to themes, what we will do is we will ask our team to do a market scan at that point in time in relation to what's happening in that particular space. So for example, if we're going to be investing in peer-to-peer lending to SMEs, right? We're not just going to sit there and wait for peer-to-peer lending platform to SMEs to just sort of email us and say, hey, would you like to invest? No. What we do is we do our desktop research, right? We will scour that space within that geography, looking for businesses in that life cycle stage that we might want to invest in. And then we reach out to them and say, hey, would you like to have a chat? And then they'll say, well, actually, we're not really raising right now. And then we'll say, that's great, because we don't actually need to or want to necessarily only talk to you when you're raising capital. In fact, the best time to have the conversation is when you're not raising capital. Then you can find out about us and how we work, and we can find out about you. Keep it simple, because you'll be raising capital again and again and again if things go well, right? So the simpler you keep it, the easier it will be for later rounds. On diligence, there are a couple of things. So I noted, this is something that might be interesting for the investors in the audience, but there are a couple of things that we do from a diligence perspective that I wanted to share. So the first one, and I was just having a chat to Emily and John Westenberg before about this, is we do a very detailed timeline from inception of the business, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, right, throughout the life of the business to get to this point. And it's important for us because it gives us a sense of some of the ways that the team is thinking about solving problems. So, for example, they might not remember, but we say, look, we're going to do a timeline session. Come to the session, bring your laptop, because you're going to have to access your old emails and your calendar, because we want to know what happened Q2 of this business. And they'll say, well, we hired this salesperson. We thought they were going to be great, but from a cultural perspective, it didn't work out. We had to, let them go after 2 weeks. And these are the stories that come out. Why is this important? It's important because We want to invest in founders who have grit, who have perseverance, right? Who have agility in thinking. And when we go through this timeline exercise, it reveals these things, because I'm not going to ask in a sort of HR interview question, hey, tell me a time when you were really showed some perseverance. That's not really going to work, right? So these things reveal themselves as we go through the timeline quarter by quarter, and we do this in detail. So we ask, what was the product like at the time? What were the key technology decisions that you made at that time? What was the team like at the time? Right, the size of the team. What did you learn? And what's really cool is that some of and we sort of whiteboard it all, and we share that with them afterwards when we put it into slides. And some of the teams that we've invested in have actually gone on to use that as part of their onboarding process for new employees, right? Because it's a great story for the business. So this is one of the things that we do during diligence that I really love, because you get a really good sense of the founders, you get a really good sense of the journey that the business has been on, and it reveals these things that are important to us. Okay. The other thing that we do is we conduct our due diligence, and usually takes a couple of weeks. We conduct it in the office of the startup. So we'll sit there for 2 weeks. And it's awesome because when I've got a question around, hey, I'm looking at the financial model, and it kind of says this here, but is that there? Can you clarify? And they're just right there. And it gives us a sense of what's happening in the stand-ups, what's happening just in terms of how the business works, how the team works together, right? It gives us a sense of the business. So this is another thing that we do. We also spend a lot of social time with the founders during this time. We have lunches with them and dinners with them and various members of the team. And we want to get a sense of what are these people like as people, because we're going to be working with them for the next 5, 6, 7 years. So we want to see, and I know this is going to sound a bit odd, but everything's a test, right? So, for example, how do they treat folks, at the restaurant in terms of their own team, in terms of people who are serving them? These are sort of folks that we want to spend our time with, right? Do they talk over each other? Are they comfortable with each other? Do they give each other time and space to, whatever it might be? This is all really important, and it's all, I shouldn't say it's a test, but they're insights for us as to whether these are people that we want to work with or not. Throughout this process, please be aware that at any point in time prior to this, unless it's still a yes, treat it as a no, because it can be no at any point in time there up to number 6, right? The end of number 6. The best sign, and this is a bit of a secret now, but the best sign that you have that an investor is really interested is the cadence of communications. Okay? When we're super interested, what we do is we set up a WhatsApp chat with ourselves and the founders, and we're just chatting on WhatsApp, hey, got a question about this, you said the product did this, how far are you on the roadmap with this particular function, X, Y, Z, right? And that's a great sign from us to say, hey, we're really interested. We have a lot of questions. We want to be in close contact with you non-stop. Okay? If not, it could be, for other firms, it could be more, what's the email cadence? I'm asking a question, you're sending it back, right? So that's the biggest clue. If you're asking a question, or if they're asking a question, there's no response for like a week, it's kind of like, well, they say they're interested, but really, how interested are they? Yeah? Bear in mind, this is a guideline, not a rule, but the cadence of communications is a massive, massive tell. Cool. All right. Interesting?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. I'm glad I shared that with you. All right. So what? So what? The so what is this. Investors see a lot of deals each year. Hundreds of deals. So you need to be relevant to them. You need to stand out. And you need to be ready for a long process, because it's a long process. Yeah? You have to give yourself roughly 6 months. Some folk give themselves even a little bit more. And you hope that it closes within roughly 3 months. If it's going well. Cool? Good? All right. I'm sharing with you guys all of the sort of, the secrets of what goes on in VC phase. Okay, what do we look at? So this is initially, so before the term sheet, these are things that we look at. Okay? Not all firms are the same. That's what we look at. We look at the team, the market potential, what's the market like, if there's any differentiation in terms of competitive advantage. We look at what the team's achieved to date. We look at the potential path to profitability, and if it's something that we can believe in. We look at the terms, of course, of the investment and what the exit potential is. In terms of the team, you might ask, what do we look at? Well, we look at these things. And what's interesting for our firm is that the entire firm, because we're all involved in this part of the process, analysts, associates, partners, we all score. So it's not good just being nice to the partners. We get a perspective from everybody. What's it like working with this team? We look at the experience, execution capabilities, ethics and transparency is really important to us. Openness for input, are they open to our thoughts in relation to the business? The discipline around running this as a business, right, rather than just as a product. And what is our sense of the perseverance and agility of the team? Now, none of this is scientific. This is all, a pseudoscience in a way. But it's important to us. We ask the questions because we want to have a sense of what these things are. Why? Again, because we're going to be working with these folks for the next 5, 6, 7 years. And we feel that these are great traits to have, and these are the sorts of people that we want to work with. Cool. Very good. So all of that rolls up into what's known as an investment committee paper or an investment committee memorandum. And all the diligence that's been done rolls up into this type of document. And I'm only going to show you the table of contents because it's confidential anyway, but also because for our investment committee papers, just to let you know, not to freak you out, our investment committee papers are 100 pages long. Okay, so we do a lot of analysis. But bear in mind, we're investing at Series A and Series B, so we're investing when the business is a bit larger. So don't freak out. Seed stage investors, and I spoke to Emily about this, definitely do not do 100 pages of diligence. But we do, and the reason why we do this is because we treat the responsibility that we have for our investors' money really seriously. We want to show that we've done the homework, that we've looked at these things. Is it driving conviction for the investment? To be honest with you, by the time that we've done this, we already have conviction. We already have conviction, but we feel like it's a responsibility of ours in treating our investors' capital, in a professional way, that we should do this type of work. So it's, what's the user experience of the product, what's the business model, what's the pricing, what's the market look like, competitive landscape, traction, financials, tech diligence, legal diligence, assessment of the team, the investment terms and how the funds are going to be deployed, key risks, and the exit. This is what we look at. But behind this is a lot of pages. So for example, when it comes to the market, the things that we look at are not just what's the size of the market, but we also look at what life cycle stage is the market in. Is the market in a nascent life cycle stage? Is it consolidating? Is it post-consolidation? So that gives us a sense of what the future will be like from a competitive standpoint and what may sort of happen over the next few years. For competitors, what we do is we target 2 or 3 key competitors and we use them because we want to get a sense of how is this product different from its competitors? In what way? What sort of benefits are this product provide over its competitors? So we do the work. We sign up, we use the product, we take screenshots, and all that sort of stuff. So that's the sort of work that we do behind all of these sections. Cool? Great. All right. Okay. I'm flying through this, so if you're picking it up, you're doing a great job. Okay, so you're probably wondering, out of all of that, if I want to reach out to an investor, what should I have? And one of the key documents that you'll need to have is an investor presentation. And this is basically the Sequoia Capital, which is one of the oldest and largest VC firms in the world. This is their template, and you can just get this from their site, so it's pretty simple. And it should not surprise you at all that it covers most of the things that we cover in our assessment. So what does the company do? What problem does it solve? What's the solution? Why is now a good time? What is the size of the problem? Why is it a problem worth solving? What is competition like? What is the nature of the product? What is the business model? What's the team like? What are financial, right? I'm sure you can see the correlation here. Your investor presentation correlates quite neatly with what investors look for and what we assess the business on. The big point here is that the investor presentation is not what will make the investor invest in your business. It's a tool for you to explain clearly these key aspects of your business. It's a tool for folks within the VC firm to share with each other so that they can all get an understanding of the business. But you're not going to close an investment on the back of a really awesome investor presentation. You should make it clear, you should make it succinct, you should have a level of detail such that the firm can form a view as to whether or not to have a more detailed discussion. Yeah, that your pitch is not going to make or break on your investor presentation, but please, this template is a great template and use it. I think it explains all the sort of key aspects that we would need to know. All right. On top of that, what else do you need? An investor presentation itself is not enough. You need to have a 1 or 2 page summary of that investor presentation. And the reason is because, when you send something to me and it's a 1 or 2 pager, if it's not relevant for us at this point in time, I can then send that 1 or 2 pager to 1, 2, 3, 4 other potential investors. If you don't have that, I won't send it. Right? Even better is on top of this, if you have like a blurb, an introductory blurb that can be included in the email, that's even better. It just makes it so easy. You can just imagine, we're just introducing folks to each other all day. So the easier you make it, the better it will be. And there's a great post from one of the folks who went through StartMate a few years ago on how investor intros work. You should definitely take a look. All right. The other thing that we'll need to see is the financial model. To be honest with you, in relation to the financial model, the thing that I'm looking at is more how do you think about the deployment of the capital that you've raised or wanting to raise? Where does it go? What is it being spent on? When is it being spent on? And I've just noticed that really good teams have that, really detailed. And I've thought it through really, really well. I'm not as fussed about the revenue side unless it's a Series A business that I can see some stability, or if it's a big round business, I obviously spend more time on it. But I'm more concerned with the deployment of capital because you'll have that under your control. The revenues, sales, you don't really know yet, particularly at seed stage. Okay, how thoughtful you are in terms of how you spend your capital is one way for us to get a sense of how you think about the business. Cool? Okay. Financial model, data room. So on the data room, basically, have this prepared. It's essentially all the legals pertaining to your business. For example, if you've got audited accounts, you put them in there. If you've got employment contracts, you put them in there. If you've got major contracts with clients, you put that in there. There's a great post, the link here too, where you can just take a look and see what you should put in the data room. But it's pretty straightforward. Okay. What else do you need? You need an incorporated entity. Without that, there's nothing to invest in. So you need to have that. And lastly, for your own benefit, you should understand key terms for an investment. And the best way to do that is to read a book called Venture Deals by Brad Feld and Jason Mendelsohn. I think it's on its 3rd edition now, and it's the book to read. It's awesome. It's fantastic. Okay, it will teach you the things that you need to know. And it's short. All right. So what? What does this all mean? So it means, hey, be prepared. Get this stuff ready before you reach out to investors. Right? You don't want to have to scramble. And the investor say, oh, that was an awesome presentation. Love to have access to the data room, and there isn't one. Okay, so be prepared and set that up beforehand. Understand how investor intros work. Make it easy for an investor. If they're not the right one, make it easy for them to send it to other folks as quickly as possible. Please remember that it's an asynchronous process. You're sending something, they're asking for something, you're sending something, right? It doesn't happen like in the movies. You're not going to pitch in front of a room of awesome people and someone's going to say, hey,
is $1 million. That's not how it works. It's a process, and you need to treat it like a process. In fact, you need to treat it like a sales process. And what I mean by that is at every stage, you need to qualify. And I found that if you give investors an out, give them an elegant out, and kind of like encourage them to take it, that's a really good test. What do I mean by that? You can say at each step of the process, hey, look, I've sent you my 1 or 2 pages, but if this isn't right for you, if this is not, in your life cycle stage or your timing or your strategy, that's really cool, I fully understand. And they may come back to you with that. Or they might say, no, this is exactly what we're looking for. And then you can say, great, well, I'll give you access to my data room. And then you give them some time to review it, and you're like, hey, look, if this is not what you're looking for, then that's cool. Please, if you could refer us to somebody else, right, that would be fine. The reason why I'm saying this is because if you give them an out and they don't take it, they're probably likely genuinely interested. It's kind of like what Tony Hsieh does with Zappos and his Zappos employees each year, right? What he does, and this is in the book Delivering Happiness, is he offers employees each year $5,000 to leave. And if they don't leave, it's like, hey, they really thought about it, they really want to stay in. And this is the opposite of that, right? So give your investor an elegant out, and if they don't take it, then they're more likely to be genuinely interested. Make sense? It doesn't happen like the movie stars. All right. That was a lot. And we got through a lot in a pretty short period of time. So we flew through that. That usually takes a lot more time, but the materials are going to be available online, so you can reference that, which is good, because then we'll have more time for Q&A with our great guests. So, a couple of things. Some tips. For your business, particularly at seed stage, seek feedback from as many customers, friends, mentors as possible, not just investors. Right? Don't be afraid that they're going to copy your idea, and it's very unlikely. What's more unlikely is that not enough folks will care about it. So get out there and get that feedback. And the feedback is important because the person that really needs to be convinced is not an investor. The person that really needs to be convinced on all levels of this business is you. Your time is much more precious than the funding that you're seeking. Your time is what you're really testing. Is this worthwhile? Okay, make sure you're prepared with your investor deck and one page and all that sort of stuff. Conduct your research, we talked about that. Everyone talks about this, so I shouldn't have to mention it, but wherever it's possible, seek a form intro. Treat the process like a sales funnel, planned, methodical, and qualify. I think Mark Suster did a post recently on making sure you do that, qualify folks throughout the process. Remember that you will need to work with this investor that you're bringing on board for 5 years or more. So you should be interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. Okay? It's a long journey. Keep the terms simple and straightforward. Read venture deals. And I think maybe most importantly, try not to be disheartened by lots of no's. It only takes 1 or 2 yeses. For most folks that I talk to and they're raising capital, I'll suggest for them to speak to, if they can find, up to 50 relevant investors. Yeah, some other folks are saying 70. If you can find 50 in our region, that's a pretty good job. But be prepared, because most of them will say no. So you have to be resilient. And the best way to think about it, I think anyway, it's easy for me to say, because I'm the one that's saying no most of the time. But the way to think about it is as a question of fit. This is what I'm about. This is what I want to do. Does this fit with you right now? And if it doesn't fit, that's cool, because it could fit later on. And move on, and move on, and move on, and move on, and move on. It's just a question of fit. Try not to take it as a question of identity. Try not to take it as a question of worth. It's just a question of fit. Cool? Great. Awesome. I think that's it.